Today let's look at the Franklin's Tale. Now the Franklin's Tale, of course, reminds you of the rocks, reminds you of the ocean. There are some rocks. I'm parked in front of the ocean. Everyone's telling me I'm going to be arrested because you're not allowed to be next to the ocean. But let's see if I get arrested or not. The cops aren't stopping me. The main point I want to say is that when you think of the Franklin Tales, you think of magic, and magic is associated in the text with literary imagination. You remember the scene when the squire, the clerk's brother, head to Orleans to meet the master magician, and they come into a field where they see hunting. It's next to a castle, and there's hunting. There are knights jousting.
Though saw he Kenichtes jousting in a plain, and after this he did him switch plaisance, that he him showed his lady on a dance, on which himself he danced as him thought. And when this meister that this magic wrought sought was time, he clapped his hands twoe, and farewell, all our revel was ago. And yet removed they never out of the house, while they saw all this sight marvelous. But in his study thereas his book is be, they said still, and no wheat but they three.
These are the literary dreams, right? They're nourished by books. We've already seen that in Parliament of Fowls and the Book of the Duchess. Well, part of those books that nourish dreams, in the case of the Franklin, are what we call gentry romances. Romances associated with that aspiring class that we call the gentries. Now, if you read the Franklin's Tale, and the Franklin, mind you, is a special pleader in medieval courtrooms, okay? He's a lawyer just like the man at law. He has a particular social aspiration that we identify with gentility, okay, and the gentilessa. Notice, for example, at the very beginning of the book, the role of the gentles. Do you remember this? What do they say after they discover the knight's going to tell the story?
Were it by aventure or sort or cast, the soth is this, the cut filled to the knicht, of which full blithe and glad was every week.
Everyone is happy, right? And you remember right after he finishes its tale at the beginning of the Miller's Prologue?
One that the knicht hath thus his tale he told, in all the route, no was there young, no old, that he ne said it was a noble story, and worthy for to draw into memoria, and namely the gentles every one.
The gentles, right? And it's glossed in most editions as the gentlefolk. Gentle meaning noble. But it's also associated with the gentry. What's important is that the Canterbury Tales reflects social aspirations on the part of those who are middle class or lower nobility. The book is filled with these aspirations. In fact, remember, the storytellers all basically come from the middle class, except for the knight. But even still, there are no ecclesiastical figures. There's no bishops. There are no lords in the Canterbury Tales. Notice also how the Franklin interacts with the squire. He compliments the squire for his gentility when he compares him to his bum of a son.
And he hath lever talken with a page than to commune with any gentle weak, for he might learn gentilessa aright. Straw for your gentilessa, quote our host.
If his son hung out with the gentles, the nobles, those with nobility, he'd learn some gentilessa, right? That is, the manners associated with chivalry and the nobles, their courtly behavior, their courtliness, their refinements, their grace, and even their eloquence. Now, the status of being a gentle also permeates the romance itself. Now, since it is a romance, it has to be about a knight. And this knight, Arviragus, has a wife. But what is important here is that his wife is treated as a lady, okay? Remember, in courtly literature, this literature that these tales aspire to, the lady is always valorized, never demeaned like the way wives are demeaned. In love, or vrai love, which sounds like the French vrai amour, like true love, is all about equality. You have to think about this courtly love, this term you like to use, but was actually called fin amour in France and in Occitan troubadours. Fin amour is about a certain equality of men and women. It's the origins of feminism. I've told you that the origins of feminism are founded in this courtly area, where a whole vocabulary about women are changed, how armed men with swords and violence are suddenly tamed and start to treat women as if they are worthy of respect. Also, the church tells husbands that their wives are not property but they're equals. These are two important pillars for the future of our male-female equality and male-female relations. And we see it in this text. It's starting to rain right now.
Love will not be constrained by maestria. When maestry cometh, the god of love anon beateth his wings, and farewell, he is gone. Love is a thing, as any spirit free. Women of kin desiring liberté, and none to be constrained as a thrall, or a slave, or a servant. And so done men, if I soothsaying shall.
Moving over here because my it's starting to rain. I don't have a jacket or anything. Let me move it over this way. How's that? Does that look better? Better view, huh? This is very different from the wife of Bath. Why? Because with the wife of Bath, there's always struggle, and there's also satire. But in the courtly ethos of fin amour, the dominant topos is submission or servitude to your love. Do you understand that? The lady in this ethos holds sovereignty over her lover. She is Lord, and this is a feudal topos that we find in medieval literature. The lady as Lord. The wife of Bath, in a way, is playing with that.
Here may men seeing and humble wheeze accord. Thus has she take her servant and her lord, servant in love and lord in marriage. Then was he both in lordship and servage. Servage? Nay, but in lordship above, since he had both his lady and his love. His lady, certes, and his wife also, the which that law of love accordeth to.
So medieval love positions the lady in a position of sovereignty. Okay? Now, by extension, in marriage, even men must be patient. Now, we saw this already in the Clerk's Tale, when the Petrarchan idea is that the patience of Griselda is a patience for all man, woman, and children. In this tale, the men have to limit their patriarchal power, if I may use the language of feminism.
Look, who that is most patient in love, he is at his avantage all above. Patience is an high vertu certain, for it vanquish, as these clerk is saying, things that rigor should never attain.
The result is bliss. Now, medieval romances tend to de-emphasize marriages. Crichton de Troyes' Arthurian romance, Eric and Enid, is all about the problems of marrying your lady. Here, the knight's view of marriage is in continuity with his status as a lover. In fact, the lover's attitude towards marriage is associated with his estate or degree as knight.
Of his free will, he swore her as a knicht, that never in all his life he day or ne nicht, ne should upon him take no maestria, again her will, ne kith her jealousy, but her obey and follow her will in all as any lovers to his lady shall, save that the name of sovereignty that would he have for shame of his degree.
His wife then is not really his wife. His wife is still his lady. And how does his lady and wife, Dorigen, describe this whole situation? As gentilessa.
She thanked him, and with full great humblesse, she said, Sire, sith of your gentilesse ye proffer me to have so large a reign, no would never God betwixt us twain, as in my guilt were other wear or strife. In other words, there will be harmony.
She thanks him for his noble character. Of course, you could argue that the whole fact that there is a choice being made proves that they're not equal. But you have to understand that feminism and equality between the genders can only occur when someone with power, let's say patriarchal power, someone with weapons, someone who is violent, decides to lay them down and decides to treat the person who they usually did not even recognize as their equal. Feminism begins with the decision being made. That's what makes medieval culture so interesting. You've already seen these examples in the Canterbury Tales, where the entire text is about the relationships between men and women, husbands and wives. Here, we're seeing it played out within the ideals of Fin Amour. So, the knight will lay his power down before his wife in order to make her his equal. So what you're witnessing in the Franklin's Tale is the beginning of feminism. And so this attitude, this change, is considered noble. It's associated with that estate. And those who aspire to be noble must recognize that this behavior, treating others as your equal, is worthy of emulation. And even Aurelius, the squire, who loves Dorigen, recognized how bad he's been through the optics of gentilessa.
And in his heart he caught of this great ruth, so in his heart he was filled with pity, considering the best on every side, that from his lust yet where him lever abide, than done so high a churlish wretchedness against Franchise and all the gentilessa.
This ruth, this courtly pity, which of course is another topos, shows that he's learned a lesson. He has to be like the knight.
Thus can a squire done a gentle deed, as well as can a knecht without dread.
That lesson transfers to the clerk.
This philosopher answered, Live, brother, everych of you did gently till other. Thou art a squire, and he is a knecht. But God forbid for his blissful meat, but if a clerk could done a gently deed, as well as any of you, it is no dread.
Acting genteel expands then beyond the marriage circle. It becomes a model for good social behavior. It goes from the knight to the lady, lady back to the knight, the husband to wives, the squire to the lady, and then clerks to the squire. It promotes social harmony. You cannot have people not thinking of other people.
Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell.